mountain denizen. Their nitro-burning counterparts, the funny cars, are much less brutal in appearance, but no less impressive with their staggering performance. Top Fuel ranksters, belying their almost fragile appearance, blast down 1,320 feet of asphalt in a flurry of sound and speeds approaching 290 miles an hour. The 280-mile-an-hour charge of the funny car presents a thundering challenge to all who would hope to tame its 4,000 horsepower. Both categories bring drag racing enthusiasts to their feet, and both will be featured today as Budweiser presents the Showcase of Champions. The National Hot Rod Association joins ESPN in bringing you Speed World. The NHRA, the world's largest motorsports sanctioning body, showcasing auto racing's fastest accelerating machines that thread the quarter-mile distance in less than 5 seconds. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave McClellan. Today, we are featuring coverage of two special National Hot Rod Association presentations. The Big Bud Shootout for funny cars here at Indianapolis Raceway Park, and out in Pomona, California, it is the Budweiser Top Fuel Classic. Both fields of 8 were determined through a season-long points chase based on qualifying points at 18 national events. The result, 2 fields comprised of the top racers in each category. Here at Indianapolis Raceway Park, in the 9th annual Big Bud Shootout, our funny car racers just about ready to go. For more on that story, here's my good friend, Steve Evans.
David, on a rather warm and humid day, we have got an interesting field of competitors for this year's Big Bud Shootout. For example, Ed the Ace McCullough in his Oldsmobile. He has never won the Big Bud. He's been in it every year. He's won 4 U.S. Nationals titles on this same racetrack in Indiana. Can't win at $50,000. He's up against a rookie in this competition. That is Jim White and Roland Leong's Dodge Daytona. Doesn't matter what your number is and what you've done in Winston points racing. The Big Bud just seems to be an elusive prize. Just ask Bruce Larson in his Oldsmobile. He may be number 1 in the sport, but he sure can't win this one. Now, Tom Hoover been racing funny cars as long as there have been funny cars. He has never won it, but he's pumped up to get a good piece of that change today. He says, boy, this team could use the money. Scott Colletta, well, he's too old to be a rookie and too young to be a veteran. Kind of stuck in the middle. Also winless in Big Bud competition. Not true for the man who drives that Ford Probe, Mark Oswald. He has won the Big Bud twice, the most of any driver competing today, and he's also had a runner-up finish. Now, Casey Spurlock, the 1990 Winter Nationals champ in his Ford Probe, he's a rookie like Jim White. He's never seen this day. And here's a man who collected the big prize. John Force has had a win here and 2 runners-up looking for his second Big Bud victory. Just a few moments before they light him up. David, back to you.
Thanks, Steve. And out in Pomona, California, a similar group of pilots of land-locked missiles are just about ready to go in the 6th annual Budweiser Top Fuel Classic. And to find out more about them, let's turn to a man who knows more than practically anyone about Top Fuel racing, 3-time Winston champ, Don Garlits. Don, the weather here is warm and windy. What's it like out in Pomona, California?
Well, Dave, the weather at Pomona today is outstanding. 0 wind, moderate temperatures, and a track that's nice and cool, which should generate good ETs. Now, some of the cars to watch are naturally Gary Ormsby, Joe Amato, and you think, well, they're going to be the winners, but we have a spoiler in there, and his name is Eddie Hill. He qualified very well, and he has a real good chance to knock off Ormsby in the first round. Now, on the other side of the ladder, we have Joe Amato and team. You would think, by looking at the competitors, Joe will go to the finals quite easily, but not so. Joe's mind today is set on low ET of the event, and when you think like that, sometimes you spin the tires. So there you have it, Dave. I think this race is up for grabs.
Well, Don, I am certain that Gary Ormsby and his team, headed by crew chief Lee Beard, and all of the rest of the racers will be doing their very best to stop Joe Amato. There is a $50,000 top prize at stake in both the Budweiser Top Fuel Classic and the Big Bud Shootout, and at Indianapolis Raceway Park, here's the way they're paired. John Force will race the rookie, Casey Spurlock. Force having Lane Joyce. Mark Oswald against Scott Coletta. Oswald gets to pick his lane. Bruce Larson against Tom Hoover. Larson has the lane choice in this match. And the first pair of cars we'll see, Ed McCulloch against Jim White, finds McCulloch picking the lane. The lane choice going to the car that qualifies better throughout the entire season of racing. Here it was number 4 and number 5, with McCulloch being just a few points ahead of White. McCulloch driving the Larry Minor owned Oldsmobile, starting things off as Jim White does with that long, smoky burnout designed to heat the tires, get them as clean as possible, and in doing so, provide as much traction as is available for the 4,000 horsepower that these drivers control. Just how important are these special events in the world of drag racing? Take a look at this huge crowd here in Indianapolis. Jim White in the far lane, qualified 5th with 2,640 points. He is racing against the number 4 qualifier, McCulloch, who outqualified him by only 45 points in an entire season of racing. McCulloch has got one thing on his mind. That is, a year ago on this racetrack at the Big Bud Shootout, he went out in the first round of competition due to mechanical problems. He is hoping that does not happen again today. Jim White wants to make a great debut performance here in the Big Bud Shootout. And Jim White goes up in smoke. McCulloch advances to the Final Four with a fine 5:46 at over 274 miles an hour. But Jim White, losing traction right off the starting line, raises the question, is that lane suspect? As White blasted off the starting line in the Hawaiian Punch Dodge Daytona, all was well. But just a few hundred feet down track, the tires lost traction, and he lost the race. Down at the far end of the racetrack, Steve Evans with Ed McCulloch.
Well, I have to wonder if Ed McCulloch had known that Jim White had lost traction, if you still would have run 274.
Well, it's the first time we've really been down the racetrack here, Steve. You know, we had to soften the thing up. We've been coming at it pretty hard. You know, this is important to win these races, so we backed it up and just went down the track.
5.46.
Well, that's okay. You know, I don't know. We'll see what happens. Now we can step back after it.
Okay. Ed McCulloch headed for the Final Four.
And $50,000 at stake at the end of the rainbow at the Big Bud Shootout out in Pomona, California. The Budweiser Top Fuel Classic. Frank Bradley is coming into the staging lanes. They're getting ready there for the 8 best Top Fuel dragsters in the world to challenge for their $50,000 top prize. Right behind him comes Kenny Bernstein, and while Kenny cannot be considered in any way a rookie, this is his very first appearance in the Top Fuel Classic. The Showcase of Champions is being brought to you by Budweiser, the king of beers, with that clean California. Gary Ormsby pulling down in front of the huge crowd that is jammed into the Pomona Fairplex. They are anticipating the start in just a few moments of the Budweiser Top Fuel Classic. But back in Indy, we are in round number 1 of the Big Bud Shootout. In the near lane, it is Tom Hoover. In the far lane, Bruce Larson. The fiberglass body being lowered by the crewman down over the engine on Hoover's car. The same procedure has been conducted on Larson's vehicle. Both drivers approach a big puddle of water that lessens the traction between the track and the tires, and the burnouts begin. Getting the tires just as hot as possible, the burnout procedure also lays down a fresh surface of rubber on the racetrack. That keeps it consistently sticky. The Big Bud Shootout has been contested here at Indianapolis Raceway Park since its inception back in 1982, when Frank Hawley was the very first winner. He's now driving Darrell Gwynn's Top Fuel dragster. Don Prudhomme is the defending champion. He made the switch over the winter to Top Fuel and did not qualify for the Budweiser Top Fuel Classic. The final check under the body. Maynard Yanks, the crew chief for Bruce Larson, performing the necessary moves on that engine, while Tom Hoover continues to back up after his long burnout. Hoover qualified in the number 6 spot using mostly midfield performances throughout the 18-race qualifying season. But Bruce Larson had 2 number 1 qualifying spots, a pair of number 2s, and 3 number 3s to head his effort throughout the entire year. The question here is, why has Bruce Larson selected the lane that he just watched Jim White go up in smoke? The lane choice was his, and yet he remained in that lane. Well, I guess that's the obvious answer. Hoover goes up in smoke, and Larson is the winner. It is apparent there's nothing wrong with this racetrack. It's all in how you run your race car as to whether it sticks to the ground or not. Bruce Larson, a 5:42, advancing to the final 4 of the Big Bud Shootout. Our next pair of cars already coming to life. Here is the Candies and Hughes Motorcraft Ford Probe. This is Mark Oswald at the wheel. His competition is Scott Coletta, the second-generation drag racer, at the wheel of his dad's Oldsmobile. This is the Coletta Flying Service Special. Oswald rolling forward. He heads for that bottle of water, but rather than stop there and start his burnout in the water, he rolls forward and lays the rubber down where he needs it. Coletta will be using the far lane of the racetrack, and the man with the lane choice, Mark Oswald, has selected the lane nearest the camera. Steve?
Well, certainly Bruce Larson did not let the fact that Jim White smoked the tires in front of him intimidate him. 5:42 in that same lane.
Right back in the ball game. We were worried about this first round because we had a lousy qualifying session, so I think we've got a baseline now.
272.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, he liked the speed, Dave.
Steve, he should. It indicates he's making a lot of power up there on the top end. On the starting line, Leonard Hughes, the crew chief for Mark Oswald, standing behind that Ford Probe, backing the car up into those dark black tracks you see on the pavement. That's what was left there after the burnout. Mark qualified in the number 2 spot for this special race. He had 3 number 1 qualifying positions throughout the season. For Scott Coletta, his best performance in qualifying was 1 number 5 spot, and in fact, he did not qualify at one of the races throughout the season. In part, that was due to the exploding supercharger problems that his team, headed up by his dad, Connie, has been experiencing throughout all of the season. No problems here, though. Look at Connie. Is he a happy man? Scott Coletta puts away Mark Oswald, the number 2 qualifier, 5.40. The quickest time of eliminations thus far. Watching again, we see Coletta in the far side of the racetrack. He gives up a bit of an advantage at the starting line as Oswald reacts quicker to the green light. But as they neared the finish line, Coletta had pulled ahead until by the time they crossed that mark, 1,320 feet away, he had a substantial lead.
Tell you what, anyone that was watching that gave this race to Mark Oswald at half track just didn't count on the tenacity of Scott Coletta. 5:40.
Awesome. Far out. We finally figured out our problems, I think. I mean,
You've been banging a lot of superchargers.
yeah, I think it's just one of them things. We had so many problems with the dragster through the years. Some things got away from us, and we weren't able to keep up on them. And when you get down, you get mad.
Let me give you an ace you can put in your sleeve. You've got lane choice for the final 4 rounds.
Great, thanks.
The driver with the quicker time from the previous round has lane choice. Coletta was 200 quicker than Bruce Larson. They'll meet in the final 4 out in Pomona, California. It is Gary Ormsby getting on his fire protective equipment as the Showcase of Champions continues. Budweiser Showcase of Champions. We're at Indianapolis Raceway Park for the 9th annual running of the Big Bud Shootout, and 2 cars remain in round number 1. In the far lane of the track, the rookie, the number 8 qualifier. This is Casey Spurlock. Here in the near lane, the number 1 car in qualifying throughout the entire season. That's John Force. Now let's go to the far end of the racetrack. Steve's with Mark Oswald.
Well, no one expected, least of all Mark Oswald, for the winningest driver in today's Big Bud Shootout to be out round 1, but he just drove by you.
Well, yeah, it was shaking so hard I couldn't see and spinning the tires, you know, and then lifting off the throttle. You know, you can't win like that.
Still a game 550.
Thank you.
A tough break for the 2-time Big Bud Shootout champion. There's problems on Casey Spurlock's car. The body is up, the crew running back to the truck. If you look closely, underneath the car, you see that big brown puddle? That's oil coming out of the engine. Obviously an unsafe condition. Starter Buster couch over, giving the word to Casey, shut it off. And what a tough break for him. He is out now in round number 1, and much like Ed McCulloch a year ago, he can do nothing but sit and watch as John Force takes a single to advance to the Final Four. Throughout this past season, Force in the Castrol Oldsmobile qualified in the top spot 8 times. Spurlock walking back to the pit area. You know he has got to be disappointed. John Force just obliterates the competition. His elapsed time of 5:33 at 266 miles an hour. By 0.07 of a second, the quick time of this first round of eliminations of the Big Bud Shootout. That sets up the Final Four, where Bruce Larson takes on Scott Coletta, with Coletta having the lane choice. The other pair finds John Force against Ed McCulloch, and what a battle that will be. Force gets to pick his lane. McCulloch has got his work cut out for him. His crew, headed up by Bernie Federle, hard at work preparing his race car to race Force in that Final Four confrontation. But these crews are used to this kind of work. There's a couple of guys working on the engine. There's one hard at work on the clutch part. Bernie Federle and another crewman disassembling, checking, and reassembling the cylinder heads on Ed McCulloch. And there's a problem on John Force's car. Let's go down to Steve Evans.
Well, David, we got a bit of a fire brewing here in the blower manifold of John Force. Immediately they're over to put it out. Force was screaming to get a fire extinguisher over here. And apparently the burst panel blew out of the thing. We heard it bang right in the lights. John is not real happy, but I think he'll be happy when he hears the ET anyway. 5:33, John.
It's okay. That's what we expected. Need a little help down here, whatever. Just got a break there with him and just had a chance to go for it, but snake's back. It's biting us.
They've been having a lot of supercharger problems. They thought they had them cured. Apparently not.
Steve, that could spell disaster for Force's hopes to become a repeat champion. He won it back in 1987, was runner-up a year ago.
Burns up everything. I can't even get my car back. I told him.
While John Force and his crew have to solve the problems there out in Pomona, California. We're set to go with the Budweiser Top Fuel Classic. The pairings find the defending champion Joe Amato against the Top Fuel rookie Kenny Bernstein, with Amato choosing the lane. Gary Ormsby against Eddie Hill. Ormsby has the lane choice. Dick LaHaye races last year's runner-up Frank Bradley, with LaHaye picking the lane. And our first pair to hit the racetrack finds 2 Texans, Lori Johns against Gene Snow, with Lori having the lane choice, and she has put her Jolly Rancher Candy Special in the far lane of this racetrack here at the Fairplex. Her competition out of Fort Worth, Texas, is Gene Snow. Over in the far lane, Lori Johns blasts a burnout. And now it's Gene Snow's turn. This is a racetrack steeped in tradition. Over 30 years of competition down this quarter-mile of asphalt that is actually built out of a parking lot here at the Los Angeles County Fairground facility. Lori Johns' qualifying efforts throughout the year were headed by a pair of number 2 spots with 3 number 3 positions. Gene Snow used a number 1 spot plus a number 2 and 2 number 4s to head up his qualifying list that put him in number 5 for this, the Budweiser Top Fuel Classic. A final check of the race car by Chris Eckert, the crew chief for Gene Snow. Over in the far lane, Larry Myers, serving as the crew chief for Lori Johns, has performed the same checks. Her car is race ready. They're both approaching the starting line. Inching forward, finally set. And Snow goes up in smoke, and a problem for Lori Johns. Larry Meyer knows that he's got a lot of work cut out for him now. That puff of flame means trouble. She still ran a 5:08, but slowed to 2:45. In replay, let's watch. First it was Gene Snow having problems. Snow in the near lane. Lost traction just a few feet off the racetrack. The smoke coming off the tires. He tried to recover, but again smoked the tires. Then direct your attention to the far lane. Lori Johns, as she approached the finish line, a puff of flame. Those small explosions can cause devastating problems. Now back in Indianapolis Raceway Park, Steve Evans is with K.C. Spurlock.
Well, Casey, you had a real shot at this thing. The competition, glad to see you out. The fans disappointed. What happened on the line?
Well, Steve, up on the line when we did the burnout, evidently this $1.50 O-ring came out of our System 1 oil filter. It's a thing we check a million times. Unfortunately, this time it just gave way. It was dumping a lot of oil out on the starting line, and they had to shut me off. Certainly
an unsafe condition. Where does that go exactly on the car?
This would go right here on the car. The O-ring fits between the two sections of the filter. The cartridge is inside, and the O-ring seals the front half from the rear half.
Again, sorry to see you out.
Thanks, Steve.
You know it's a disappointment for K.C. Spurlock, but here's a guy that is far from disappointed. The surprise of the Big Bud shootout thus far, Scott Coletta. He's got lane choice against Bruce Larson in the Final Four, coming up in just a few moments. In the Budweiser Top Fuel Classic, his competitor driving this car is Dick LaHaye. Now Bradley with his burnout. Between them, nearly 8,000 horsepower on the starting line here at the Pomona Fairplex as this huge crowd watches intently a race that has been dominated by one man, Joe Amato. 4 times he has been the champion. The year that Don Garlits won it in 1986, Joe Amato was the runner-up. This guy has felt the sting of Amato in this Top Fuel Classic. Frank Bradley was the runner-up a year ago in his Easy Wider Special. He returns this year in the number 6 qualifying position, using a number 2 spot and 2 number 4s to head his qualifying effort. Meantime, Dick LaHaye at the wheel of the Miller High Life Special. Also qualified number 2 once, but he had 4 number 3 qualifying positions throughout the 18-race season to lead him here into the number 3 spot. That gave him lane choice. He selected the far side of the racetrack. You know Bradley has got to be thinking about Gene Snow, who just went up in smoke a moment ago. This time it's Dick LaHaye. And Bradley squeaks by. What a turn of events. The time of 5:49. Not all that impressive, but the win is what counts. Back in Indianapolis Raceway Park, what counts there is the ability of the crew of John Force to find the problems in his Castrol Oldsmobile. That exploding supercharger problem is one that has plagued John throughout this entire season. He thought he had it fixed, but it is obvious by the results of round 1 that that's not the case. Out in California, Fuzzy Carter, he's the one nearest the camera on the left-hand side of the race car. He is the crew chief for Eddie Hill on the Super Shop Special. You're watching the engine starting procedure. And that big 500 cubic inch motor comes to life as he gets ready to challenge Gary Ormsby. And remember, Eddie Hill is the driver that Don Garlits picked to be the spoiler in this Budweiser Top Fuel Classic. This is Gary Ormsby as he rolls forward to get ready for his burnout. Let's go to the far end of the track and Don Garlits.
Well, Frank, 5:49 is not too impressive, but you're down here first, and that's one leg up on this 50,000.
Yeah, it looks like we backed it up a little too far, doesn't it?
Well, I'm sure Frank will get it stepped back up for round number 2.
Of course, Frank Bradley referring to the fact that he backed off on the horsepower, backed down on the available power on that engine. It worked for him this time because Dick LaHaye smoked the tires. In the future, though, he better find some horsepower. Eddie Hill looks like he may be having some problems. Maybe a valve stuck in his fuel distribution system, because that is nothing but raw fuel pouring out of the right-hand side of that engine. This is not a good sign for Eddie Hill. Look at it. It's coming out in droplet form as the crew looks on, and they kind of know what the answer is going to be. The word goes to Eddie Hill. Cut it off. And Gary Ormsby gets the same kind of break that his Castrol teammate John Force did back in Indianapolis just a few minutes ago. A single in round one of this special event. Uses it to his advantage. Look at the time. 5:01 at a blistering 289 miles an hour. And for the man who had been cast in the spoiler role, he has to settle for a push back to the pit area. In Indianapolis, Bruce Larson intently looking over the computer tapes that reveal what went on his race car in his previous run. His crew chief Maynard Yanks and the gang getting that car ready for its confrontation with the surprise of this race thus far, Scott Coletta. Now out in Pomona, Don Garlitz.
Well, Gary, a 5:01 289 in my book. That's called Back to You, Joe.
Well, yeah, we hope that'll hold. You know, we need that low ET of this event. I really don't think it will, but we're proud of that. We backed her off a little bit for that run, Don. We didn't want to smoke the tires.
I think you did quite well.
Gary Ormsby's 5:01 has certainly set a mark for everybody else to shoot at, particularly this man, the defending champion, Joe Amato. He's coming up next. Pomona, California, and Steve Evans at Indianapolis Raceway Park, where Scott Coletta's race car is being pulled into the staging lanes for his Final Four confrontation with Bruce Larson. Out in Pomona, we're riding along with Kenny Bernstein in his Budweiser King Top Fuel Dragster. Kenny is one of the last two cars in this first round of competition for the Budweiser Top Fuel Classic. There is $50,000 at stake going to the winner, and you know that Kenny has got to be thinking about the fact that this man, Joe Amato, has taken that money 4 out of the 5 times this race has been contested. Joe's qualifying #1 reflects the achievement of 7 top spots this season, while Kenny Bernstein was only able to muster 3 #5 positions and 2 #6s, generally qualifying in the middle part of the field. He ended up #8 in this classic. Joe Amato pulls ahead and wins round #1, 5:04, just a little bit slower than the time set by Gary Ormsby at 2:79. You've seen what it looks like from inside the cockpit. Now let's look from the outside in replay. Amato in the far lane, Bernstein in the near lane. It was close for about 100 feet. And then Amato gradually began to pull away until they neared the finish line at the end of the quarter-mile racetrack, and a full car length victory for Joe Amato. Don Garlitz?
Well, 5:04, Joe. You didn't get low ET, but you're right there. I mean, you're making the kind of performance it takes to win this race, and you know, you're the only ones that ever won it but me.
Yeah, I know. It's been tight. We would have liked it. The low ET is pretty important here, but it's going to get a lot hotter this afternoon, so it might be tough to get it, but we'll just have to take them as they come. You know, we're glad to get the win light, but we're really trying to concentrate on the championship race, so I guess you have to be happy we wouldn't get the win light, but we'll just see what happens.
The pairings revealed that Joe Amato and Gary Ormsby cannot meet until the final round. First, each must get past the final 4. And in those pairings, it finds Gary Ormsby against Frank Bradley with that brilliant 5:01, giving Ormsby the lane choice. Amato, with his 5:03 time, gets to pick the lane over Laurie Johns, who ran that engine-destroying 5:08. Back at Indianapolis Raceway Park, the final 4 of the Big Bud shootout underway. That is Bruce Larson in the far side of the track, backing up after his burnout. He has to be wondering, what's it going to take to stop Scott Coletta? Larson ran a 5:42 in his Sentry Tack Engages Oldsmobile in round number 1 to earn this berth, while Scott Coletta ran an even quicker 5.40. That 200ths of a second advantage gave him the opportunity to select his lane, and he put Bruce Larson in the lane furthest from the camera. I would say that as a result of the performances in round number 1, each lane is equal. Therefore, there should be no advantage going to either driver. Gingerly, the two drivers stage. And this time it is Bruce Larson with a 5.40, 270-mile-an-hour charge. He heads into the finals of the Big Bud Shootout. Back at the starting line, John Force getting strapped into his race car's got to be thinking about one thing. Have they fixed the exploding supercharger? Out in Pomona, California, you want to see happiness? Look at Joe Amato getting pulled back into the pit area in front of this huge crowd, enjoying this Budweiser Top Fuel Classic.
Nothing beats #1
champion. We're in Pomona, California for the Budweiser Top Fuel Classic, and this is the crew for Lori Johns. They're repairing the engine in her Top Fuel dragster after that explosion that was suffered in round number 1. Don Garlitz, what else is happening?
Well, Dave, the story here in Pomona as we get ready for round 2 of the Top Fuel Classic is some of these teams are having problems, and Joe Amato is no exception. The favorite, he returned to the pits. A broken lifter was discovered. The camshaft was damaged. This is serious, not a routine maintenance problem. They put a new camshaft in. It could be better. It could be worse. Each one of those things has a personality. Then, over in the Lori Johns pits, we saw the explosion in round 1. She returns to the pits, has to change the manifold, the blower. All of the top end of the engine is damaged. The question is she going to be able to get repaired and time to get back for round 2? It seems like Joe Amato will make it, but there's that little question of performance. Will it be as good as it was, or maybe it'll be better?
Don, a lot of questions remain to be answered out there in California. Here at Indianapolis Raceway Park, we're ready for the second pair of the Big Bud Shootout, final 4 of competition, as Ed McCulloch and John Force square off. This is McCulloch. And for John Force, you get a unique opportunity to see what it's like from inside his race car. McCulloch's burnout proceeding in the far lane of the racetrack while John Force approaches the water. And once again, we cannot stress to you enough how much John Force has got to be thinking about the exploding supercharger problem that he has had all season long, and it has recurred here at Indianapolis. Inside the race car, it begins to fill up with smoke as John completes his burnout. Let's go to Steve Evans with Bruce Larson.
The track is changing. The sun comes in, the sun goes out. You've got to keep watching the sky.
That's right. We got to compensate with the clutch for the track temperature on the starting line. Maynard's doing a good job of that and still stepping up the pace.
Does the 5.40 surprise you at all? Is that what you figured it'd run?
I wanted a little better, but it felt good. It felt like we gained something on the clutch tune-up, so I think we're ready for the next round.
The final round of the Big Bud Shootout.
That's it. Thanks.
Bruce Larson's going to be interested in this next pair because the winner there will meet him in the final round. And the question is, can either Force or McCulloch run quicker than that 5.40 laid down by Larson? Austin Coyle, the crew chief, looking in. He gives us the okay sign. It's time to go racing. They've got the engine repaired, back together. The crewman underneath the rear of the body on Ed McCulloch's car. Obviously, that's where the switch is for the electronic onboard recording device. He's now turned it on, exits the area as McCulloch heads into the staging beam. These two drivers just one race away from a shot at a $50,000 run. McCulloch trailed with a a 5:41, but the important point here is that John Force, by 6,000ths of a second, has lane choice over Bruce Larson in the final. Let's ride along in replay with John Force. Question is, does he still have the problem? And the answer is yes. You saw just a very slight pop indicating to John that the difficulty continues with his supercharger system. But in spite of that, he is in the finals of the Big Bud Shootout for the second year in a row, racing Bruce Larson. Steve?
Now that's my fire crew. Thank you. Thank you. Saved her.
John, I heard another little pop right at the finish line.
It's going to be this way to the end of the war, I guess. But, man, I tell you, I don't know if I'm starting to hear things because I'm getting old, but I heard McCullough right out my window. I don't know.
You weren't hearing things.
Well, what was I hearing? I don't know. He was.
When you run a 5:40 to his 41, he is right there.
No, he was right there. I tell you, I was shaking on the starting line, and we're going to need some of this Bud money to pay this deal back. But most of all, the fire crew, they were here with me, and give my guys some time to get this thing fixed again.
The damage not nearly as bad this time, Dave, as it was in round one.
Steve, that's good news because the always energetic John Force will have the lane choice in the final by 6/1000ths of a second. For Bruce Larson, that's Bruce on the right, Maynard Yanks, his crew chief on the left. They are conferring, and obviously there's nothing frantic happening around the pit area of Bruce Larson. Just a computer printer giving them the facts. Back in Pomona, California, Jerry Amato, the wife of Joe, directing traffic as her husband puts the Valvoline Special exactly where he wants it on the starting line. The crew making a final check of the engine. Remember, it's got a new camshaft in it. The question is, will it work? His competitor is faced with a few questions, too. Lori Johns exploded an engine in round number one. They had to put a whole new supercharger system in on that car, and the same question applies. Will it work? Sure worked for Joe, a 5:03 and 275. He's in the finals for the 6th year in a row. At Indianapolis Raceway Park, one of our finalists, John Force, has still got lots of problems. His crew chief, Austin Coyle, is directing his attention to the bulk of them. Let's go to Steve Evans, who's in the pit area.
Well, Austin, the crew chief over on Bruce Larson's car, he's just kind of cruising, Maynard Yanks. No problems. Here, it's anything but a cruise.
Oh, hey, we've been having this problem where it blows the blower off at the finish line, but it's doing it when he's lifting his foot off the throttle. It doesn't really affect the way the car runs, and we came to Indy with 9 new blowers. This ain't bothering us either. It's just a little bit of work.
In case you couldn't find the problem, you just feed it the parts.
That's it. If it takes a new blower every run, it gets a new blower every run.
Well, that's one solution. Let's go back to Pomona. Don Garland with Joe Amato.
Well, Joe, anybody that would bet against you in the final at this Top Fuel Classic would have to be a fool. A 5:03, beautiful performance.
Well, the car's running real good. It's pretty hot here to run a 5:03 in the heat like today. We're happy with it. Tim Richards and my guys are doing a good job in making the car perform. But once you get to the final, it's anybody's game. You know that, Don. You're the only guy that's beat me in this race so far out of 6 years it'll be.
But you got to keep one thing in mind, and you know Joe is. Gary Ormsby's already run a 5:01 on this racetrack. He is now paired up against this man, Frank Bradley, who last year was runner-up to Joe Amato in this Budweiser Top Fuel Classic and would love to get his shot at him again. Of course, now this guy, Gary Ormsby's got low ET of eliminations. That's the 5:01 we were talking about. And he says, I've got the lane choice here. Bradley was only able to run a 5:49 in the first round. I'm going to go in against Joe in the final. It'll all be decided by the wind light at the end of the quarter mile. Bradley in the near lane. Ormsby over in the far lane. And it will be Gary Ormsby to race Joe Amato, but look at the time. Slowing considerably to a 5:14, 283 miles an hour. Gary Ormsby will give up the choice of lanes to Amato. Bradley's day is done, the victim of broken parts. It will be Amato and Ormsby in the final. The advantage going to Amato by 11 hundredths of a second. That's a significant margin of difference on the racetrack. If you like the action today, you can join the National Hot Rod Association today and get 48 issues of National Dragster. In addition, if you call the number on your screen and join right now, you get a free copy of the video Drag Racing 89. Don Garlitz?
Well, Gary, something definitely not too cool. 5:14, the car certainly off its pace.
Well, Don, we slowed her down a little bit that time. We didn't figure the track would be as good as it was the first round, and we did back it off with our first qualifying run yesterday, although we didn't think it'd fall quite that far. But we did back her off a little.
Difficult sometimes to just hair tune them like that, isn't it?
It really is. You know as well as anybody where we're at.
Don, his time didn't fall off. It fell like a rock to a 5:14, giving a big psychological advantage to Joe Amato in the final of the Budweiser Top Fuel Classic. Coming up in just a few moments on the Showcase of Champions. Budweiser Showcase of Champions. We're in Indianapolis Raceway Park. We're riding with John Force. We're in the final round of the Big Bud Shootout. Two supercharger explosions, two repair jobs, and here is John Force ready to race Bruce Larson for $50,000 to the winner. As the preparations for this final round continue here in Indianapolis, let's go out to Pomona, California, and join Don Garlitz.
Dave, I'm here in Gary Ormsby's pit. The underdog, believe it or not, Lee Beard, the crew chief, has his feet to the fire. Between the first and the second round, they lost 13 hundredths of a second in performance in their ET. Now, Amato was just as steady as a rock, a 5:04, and then the second round, a 5:03. A 5:14 does not beat a 5:03 in this game. The crew has removed the engine heads, the clutch can. They have everything completely apart. They are trying to find that elusive 13 hundredths of a second. The question is, will they be able to do it in the time that is allowed?
Don Garlitz, that crew for Gary Ormsby is one of the best in the business. We'll see the finals out in Pomona in just a few moments, but all eyes now riveted on the starting line at Indianapolis Raceway Park. This is the showdown of the Big Bud Shootout. Bruce Larson is in the far lane. In the near lane, John Force. The advantage went to Force in the previous round by 6 thousandths of a second. We're dealing with race cars running over 270 miles an hour. The final staging procedures completed. And Force has another blower explosion. This time the car is on fire. Down the racetrack he goes. He attempts to burn off speed, gets close to the guardrail. The car continuing to burn. The cockpit filling up with smoke as John Force tries to get that car stopped. The in-car camera just dissolved into nothingness as the flames hit it. Force trying to get the emergency hatch open on the roof. He does. He comes up out of the cloud of smoke, pulls off his gloves, and starts to get off the race car. He appears to be okay, but incredibly, looks like he's taking his time. Now he is helped off the top of the burning car as the fire truck arrives on the scene. Let's go back and replay and live it once again. As John Force neared the finish line, at that exact moment, the supercharger let go. He rode out that burning ball of flame all the way to the end of this very lengthy racetrack. From inside the car, you have an opportunity to see just what John Force coped with. There was the explosion, and here came the fire. Continuing well over a half a mile into the shutdown area, John Force was battling his race car and the flames all the way. The fire consumed our onboard camera. You know how hot it had to be as Force fought back with all the talent and skill he had. As the car neared the end of the racetrack, he was able to get it stopped. He got out under his own power and is okay.
John Force crawls out of a blazing inferno to celebrate winning the Big Bud Shootout with John Gardella, one of the people that have been behind this team. Force.
I keep it off the fence.
You might have just spent 50 to win 50.
Was that good or what? Yeah. Okay. I only bumped the guardrail once. It's okay. You're okay, man. I used the fire bottles. Good driving. All right. You got him this time. And I had my foot out her when she blew. Tell him to do the same thing.
John, you've been living with this threat of fire every run for 2 races.
Exciting, ain't it? Hey, scary. The only thing I was worried about, you know, I got a brand new car here sitting in Perdome's shop, but I didn't want to use it. This thing's just a real hellraiser, and I couldn't get it off the fence. It was right on the fence. I only touched her once. It didn't get into the chassis. NHRA and their deal saved us. Bud Shootout, Castrol, Jolly Rancher, Black Shop, Easy Wider. We're earning our paychecks. And he's got enough money to buy blowers.
Hell, David, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I'm done down here.
Steve, one day John Force may run out of race cars in parts, but he'll never run out of adrenaline or words.
Hey, 536.
Celebration continues.
Hey, you want to be a driver? Step up, buddy.
John Force opening up an employment agency. He's $50,000 richer by virtue of winning the Big Bud Shootout. Out in California, it is the finals of the Budweiser Top Fuel Classic. Have Gary Ormsby and Lee Beard solved their problems? Will Joe Amato continue to be as rock solid as he has through eliminations? One of the quirks of this great driver is his superstition. It's talked about by everybody, the fans, the racers, even Joe himself. He wears a rabbit's foot, an Italian horn. He even has a pair of special Snoopy shorts. You can bet they're all with him right now. He just rolled too far through the staging beams. He's backing up, trying to get himself reset. Ormsby has yet to stage as Amato comes back into the beams. Amato on the far side of the racetrack. Coming forward the last few inches. He is the first to stage. Now Ormsby is set. And Joe Amato wins his 5th Top Fuel Classic and $50,000. Amato's time, the quickest of the day, 4:96 at 283 miles an hour. Ormsby had a slight advantage off the starting line as we look in replay. But Amato gobbled that up like it was a Thanksgiving turkey. Till by mid-course, he had built up a substantial lead and extended it to the finish line. Running the quickest time of the race, 4:96, and picking himself up another $50,000 payday in the Budweiser Top Fuel Classic. How happy can a crew get? Just watch. At the far end of the racetrack, let's join Don Garland.
A 496 at this time of the day and the racetrack like it is, I tell you, Joe, that's pretty good.
Well, what can I say, Don? $50,000. Tim Richards, my guys, Snoopy's riding on I got my Snoopy shorts on. He brought me all the luck we needed right now, but that's 5 out of 6. I don't know if I can keep this up, you know. I guess when the money shines, my team comes to the head of the line. We'll see what happens here.
Well, we would have certainly thought, you know, the odds were against you winning so many of them, but the team really came through. You came through. The car just performed flawlessly all day long.
Well, we got a little behind this weekend because we smoked the tires on our first qualifying run, but Timmy's, you know, the master he is, the weather, the track, he just, you know, the whole team, Tim Richards, my wife Jerry, Jeff Rogers, Jim Walsh, Tommy Vassie, Dick Moore, and Wayne Cannon. Every one of them guys deserves all the credit for making Joe Amato and Martine Valvoline car. I mean, you got all the Valvoline people here this weekend, and some more money goes to say no to drugs. I mean, it doesn't get much better than this.
Congratulations.
For Don Garlitz and Steve Evans, I'm Dave McClellan saying so long. The Showcase of Champions has been brought to you by Budweiser, the king of beers. Nothing beats a Bud. Coverage of the Budweiser Showcase of Champions has been a presentation of Don. A look back.